I am still using that bedroom that's been kind of altered a little from the last few lectures. And we're going to go over today some more drawing commands as well as editing with grips. And then before I even jump into that, I'm going to kind of go through a review of Polyline as well as some arcs because you're gonna need to know, well, at least be refreshed for the assignments that are coming up. So the first thing I want to do is, well, I'm going to actually freeze um, these options on our bedroom, and I'm going to actually move this desk and chair over to the right a bit so it's kind of out of the way because I want to use this room to show some other options. Oh, and we obviously don't need two different kinds of doors, so I am going to freeze. By the way, I'm using the freeze where you just select an object on a layer that you want to freeze. So I'm also going to freeze this kind of a door and leave the other doors as the example for this room. So the first thing I want to review is some things with Polyline. We just got done with that backgammon assignment. So I want to review some things with the Polyline. So if I go to Polyline, I'm just going to start somewhere over here in the corner, and I'm going to pull it out, or pull it, I'm sorry, to the right 9 inches. And it looks like I'm on the wrong layer, but I'm going to fix that later. I'm going to pull it up 1 foot 6 inches. I'm going to pull it to the right, make it even with this line, and then I'm going to switch to A for arc and finish this little object. Just going to hit enter to make sure it finishes, and I'm going to make sure this is on the right layer. Right now it's on viewport, which means it wouldn't even print if I was going to show it. So I am going to actually use the match layer, and the destination layer that I want it to be on is this furniture layer that we're using for this furniture right here. So I'm going to select this, and boom, it switches it to that layer. Looks like I still have my nightstand further away like I showed you from the last lecture, but we don't need to worry about that, right? And then just to kind of go over using Polyline with different widths like you had to do with the backgammon, I'm going to go to Polyline. And if I want to create a triangle, kind of like we did with the Polyline right here, starting at the corner and coming out and coming back, and the triangle base was 12 inches thick right here, then I would want to hover here, and I would actually want to go to the midpoint of that width. So if my width is 12 inches, I need to actually start my line at 6 inches because the width will go to both sides of the line. So I'm just going to hover here, and I'm going to pull my tracking up, and I'm going to say 6 and enter. So now I'm exactly 6 inches away from the corner, and then I'm going to hit W and enter so that I can enter the width, and it says specify starting width down here. I'm going to say 12, and then it says specify ending width. If I just hit return, it will make it 12 inches just like the starting. So I'm going to hit 0 so it goes to a point and hit enter. Then all I have to do, oh, I'm still on that same layer, is pull it out how far I want that arrow to basically go. So let's say I want it to go 2 feet, and then I'm going to hit enter. So if I actually hover on this, there is only one line. I didn't draw a line to get to it and then another line to get out. I just drew one single line, which is how your triangles should have been for your backgammon assignment. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm going to say match layer, and I'm going to select this object and then select the destination layer so it gets on that layer. And then, so that I keep drawing with that layer, I am going to say make current, and I'm going to select this to be my current layer that I'm now going to draw with. Okay, so now I'm drawing on the furniture layer. Okay, so I need to do kind of like with the backgammon. I need a triangle that's solid, and then a polyline one that is not solid, it's just 3 polylines, and then another solid one. So I think the easiest way is to copy, select the single polyline with varying widths, and since I needed to go 12 inches and then 12 inches, I actually need to copy it 2 feet away, because if I just copy it 12 inches, it's going to start here and have a solid triangle here. So I'm literally going to click outside of here so it doesn't like snap to anything, and then I'm going to say I want it to go 2 feet away. And then yes, I could continue on if I wanted to create more, but that's all I want. I just want to show you 2 for right now. Now I want to draw that polyline triangle right here with 3 lines, because that's how many lines you need for a triangle, you know? So I'm going to go to polyline, but I can't snap to this endpoint right here. I can snap to the, basically to the endpoint of this polyline with a thickness, but this corner doesn't exist in AutoCAD. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. You can't snap to it. So I'm going to hover here and go up and make sure my tracking is on. And I'm going to say I want it to start at 12 inches away. So I click, and now I am at that endpoint. So then I can keep pulling it up and say I want it to go 12 inches, which means it goes to the other corner of that triangle. And then this is where I can use my right click and do my OSNAP overrides and go mid between 2 points. So I right clicked, I held it a little longer, went to OSNAP overrides and mid between 2 points. And once I click there, it wants to know, okay, select the 2 points that you want to be in the middle of. So I'm going to select this one, I'm going to select this one, and it's going to snap right in between. So all I have to do to finish it is to go to my starting point and hit enter. And now I've got a triangle polyline that's just 3 lines. I don't have to get too carried away with how many lines, and I don't have to have any construction lines. It's just basically 1 line for this thick one, and then 3 lines to create this triangle. Okay, so enough with that review. The other thing I wanted to review is, let's say that instead of a built-in cabinet with a vessel sink, which is kind of what's showing here, let's say the client actually wants a freestanding vanity, like a pedestal vanity, and it has an actual oval sink. Oh, and before I get that, let's say that your client didn't want the door right in the middle of this wall, but they wanted the door to kind of be hidden back over here. What's really cool is using the mirror command, I can flip this entire bathroom to this other side. So if I go to mirror, and I'm careful with my selection, I want to select everything within here, but I want to select part of the wall, and then I want to select this part of the wall maybe. Then when I hit enter, I need to select the midpoint. I need it to flip exactly midpoint from here to here. So I can go over here and actually find the midpoint of this wall line. If I snap to this midpoint, notice it's the midpoint of the toilet, not the midpoint of the wall. So I'm going to just move a little bit forward. It's the midpoint of the wall. I'm going to click, and once I pull it straight this way, it's good to have ortho on, but I'm just going to make sure it's straight and click. Do I want to erase the source? Yes. So now it's completely flipped. The only thing I have to do is kind of clean it up. Right now I have this line as 1 line, and I have this line as 1 line. I only need 1 line. You can even see kind of right here where they overlap each other. So basically I need to get rid of 1 line. So I'm going to delete this one, and I'm just going to fill it with my fillet with a radius 0, so that this is now just 1 line going all the way. And the only other thing I have to do is making my wall, the wall layer current, is to just finish this end over here by going click and click. So now actually I have flipped the entire bathroom the other way. Okay, back to that sink, we need to draw a freestanding vanity right here. So for this one, I'm just going to move this one out of the way. Let's say the client may change their mind. It happens. Just going to move this out of the way. And I'm going to make sure I'm on the millwork layer. So I'm going to go to make current again. It's my favorite way to get to something that's already been created. And go to the millwork layer. And then I need to create a rectangle for this freestanding vanity. So I'm going to go to rectangle. I don't know exactly where to start, but I can get an idea just kind of clicking out here. And I'm going to say that I want the vanity to be 1'6" wide in the X direction, comma 3 feet long. So there's my vanity. Now, it's a little far away from the wall, so I probably would have to go to move and select it. And I'm just going to click out here and say I want it a little closer to this wall. But my goodness, it has kind of squared off corners, right? I wanted to remind you how you can do a polyline fillet. So if I actually go to fillet, remember that rounds the corners. Remember, one of my options is a polyline. Okay, so whether I click it here or push P and enter, it will immediately ask, okay, select your polyline, or this is where you can select the radius of it. So let's say that I want all 4 of these corners to have a radius of 4. I can say R and enter, and then it's asking for the radius, so I'm going to say 4 and enter, and now it's still asking me for that polyline. So all I have to do is click it, and it'll round all 4 corners with a radius of 4. Let's say actually they wanted 2 in the front to be 1 radius and the 2 in the back to be a different radius. I cannot use the polyline feature of fillet for that. So I'm going to undo this. I just have to use the regular fillet for that one. So I would go to fillet, and this is where I can put in my radius. Okay, so I can say R and enter. And let's say the front radius actually needs to be 6 instead of 4. So I'm going to say 6 and enter. And then I'm going to select these 2 lines. Okay, it's actually done with the command. So I have to restart the command by hitting enter. And then I select this line and this line. Done with the command again, but I still need to round off maybe the 2 in the back. So I can hit enter again, but this is where I need to change the radius. So I'd hit R and enter, and I can say for the radius in the back I need it to be 2 and enter. So it's going to be a little bit, you know, just a subtle curve for that. Hit enter again, select those 2 lines, and now I have basically the vanity that they were thinking of. But I need to draw an actual sink in the middle of that. Okay, so this is where I could go to the ellipse command, not circle. That would be just like those vessel sinks. So I want to get on the plumbing layer. So I'm going to go to make current and select this toilet because that's on the plumbing layer. And then I need to draw an ellipse. There are actually 3 different ways to draw an ellipse. Here's where the ellipse is over here on your draw menu. You have center, you have axis end, and you have elliptical arc, which is, it could be a full ellipse, but you also could just do a part of an ellipse. So let's look at the center first. For that one, you actually would select the center of the ellipse first. Okay, so I'm going to hover at the midpoint of this line, and I'm going to pull it in. It could be centered if I went here, but that would actually push it more to the back. So I'm just going to center it on the front, and I'm going to pull it with my tracking, let's say 9 inches away. That is the center of my ellipse. Now I need to say, notice why it says specify endpoint of axis. So I need one endpoint of the axis to be 9 inches. If I say 9 inches, that means the entire distance from here to the other side will be 18. Okay, so that's why I'm going to do 9. I'm going to hit 9 and enter. And notice it's ready basically to draw the ellipse. The only other point it needs is how wide do you want this side of the ellipse to go. So if it is 12 inches from here to the other side, I would put in 6 because it's measuring it from the center. And then I have my ellipse. There's my sink for my vanity. You can do the exact same thing using the next ellipse. So if I say axis N, it's just a different format of doing the same thing. So I'm going to select that, but this time it's not going to ask for the center, it's asking for an endpoint. So just as an example, out here in the middle of the bathroom, I'm going to select an endpoint of here, and then it wants to know what is the distance from endpoint to endpoint. So it's not measuring it for the center anymore. So I want to actually tell it from endpoint to endpoint, it is going to be 1 foot 6, or basically 18 inches like the other one. And then it does the exact same thing. It's asking for the width, and it is actually asking it from the center again. So I'm going to put in 6 and enter, and notice those are identical. They were drawn 2 different ways, but they are identical. The last one is if you don't want to actually complete a full ellipse. Now you still can, but this is how you can do an arc that is elliptical instead of an arc that isn't. That makes sense? So I'm going to click that, and it's asking right here for the endpoint or the center. So if I hit C and enter, I will start from the center, or it's asking for the endpoint. So I can do it with this one either way. So I'll just go, I'll basically make it right next to this one. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to say the endpoint, same as the others. So I'm going to say 18 inches away. And then, yes, I want it to be kind of like these others. So I'm going to say it is 6 inches wide. But then it has one more thing that you have to put in. It's basically saying, where do you want to start and where do you want to end your actual arc? It's basically going counterclockwise. So the more I pull it around, the more it's going to show more of that arc. So it depends on how much did you want that arc to be shown. Did you want it to go the full length, which means I would just click here again, or did you want to go just halfway, which means I could click on this side, which I just did. And so now, even though it could make a full ellipse, it's just half of it. It's just half of basically those sinks. Okay, I'm going to erase these two because we don't need them in the bathroom, right? Okay, so that is showing an ellipse, but let's go back and review kind of the arc that we were using, what was it, last week? I'm going to get back on this furniture layer by going to make current and selecting a piece of furniture. Let's say that I wanted a 3-point arc, but I wanted it with exact measurements, okay? So I want my arc to basically start here. I want it to be 9 feet long this direction and only go 3 feet in the horizontal direction. I would actually have to say those coordinates. So I'm going to go to arc, and remember the default is a 3-point. So I'm going to select the arc, and I'm going to make sure that it lines up with the bottom down here. So this will be my first point. I just clicked. But then I want to say, okay, the second point of the arc, I want it to curve in and then curve back up. So that curving in is supposed to be 3 feet. Well, let's make it 2 feet, okay? So we're going to go 2 feet out and 9 feet long. So to go 2 feet this direction, if you remember from your coordinates, we would actually type in -2 feet in the XY direction, okay? Then I would have to do comma, and then I only want to go half the distance of the full length of that arc for the second point. So I'm going to put in 4'6". So now I've got my second point locked in. I just need to tell it the last point. So I have to do the same thing again. I have to put in the coordinates from this point. So this time I'm going to put 2 feet instead of negative, because now I'm going in the positive x, comma, 4 feet 6, enter. So notice I have that perfect arc that if I go to measure, it is exactly 9 feet, okay, across, and it is actually, whoops, measure from here to here. Notice it's exactly 2 feet deep, okay? But let's say that I'm trying to create, hint, hint, um, a track lighting that maybe would go over here in the room. I need to make sure this curve continues and goes back this direction, the same as it did over here. The easiest way to do that, instead of repeating all that you just did, is to go to copy, select the arc, hit enter, and say this is my base point and I want to copy it to this point. And then I hit enter. Yeah, it's basically kind of like a sideways bird, you know, in flight. But I need to mirror it over each other so that I can get it to flip the other way. So I'm going to go to mirror, and I'm going to select this second arc and hit enter. And I want to mirror it over this center mirror line right here. So I would select this point and basically straight up. And then do I want to erase the source? Actually, in this case, yes. So now I have this nice sloping arc that is the same this way as it is this way. It's just one single arc, except it's not yet. If I click here, I still have one arc here, and I have one arc here. So I'm going to go to our join command, which is right here on our modify, 2 arrows pointing to each other. And I'm going to select this one and this one and hit enter. Now this is one single sloping type of arc, okay? So some of you may be thinking, well, couldn't I do that with the spline command? Yes and no. If I actually tried the exact same thing with spline, even with the fit option, it would look different. So let's see how that would look with a spline. I'm going to start here. Let's say negative 2 feet, comma, 4 foot 6. That's a little bit better. And then I'm going to go back the other direction, 2 feet, comma, 4 foot 6, enter. I still need to get this basic point in here in the middle, so I have to just keep continuing, okay? So I'm going to say 2 feet, comma, 4 foot 6 again, and then I need to come out again. So negative 2 feet, comma, 4 foot 6, enter. And then I do enter to exit it, but notice how it's not quite the same. It's trying to fit curves in that line, but it's basically doing it like the distance between 2 points is a line. So to go from this point to this point, it basically created as straight a line as it could, whereas this one's more of a sloping curve, okay? So 2 different ways actually doesn't create the same exact curve. So I'm going to get rid of that one. I want to keep this one. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is a wonderful command that sometimes I use and sometimes I don't, depending on how many copies of a singular object I need. So let's go back to this bedroom. Let's say that there's a huge screen TV right here on this wall and a wonderful football game, maybe like, you know, the Super Bowl or the Nuggets trying to win the championship is being played, and you have a bunch of seats out here. No, you don't have a couch, you don't have a love seat, but you want a bunch of seats, kind of like a theater seating to watch this game. There's a wonderful command up here called an array. And it has three different ways of doing it: rectangular, path, and polar. So if I wanted to create a rectangular array, meaning I wanted to copy my object in a rectangular pattern, this is the one I would select. It's a little overwhelming to begin with, but it's actually pretty simple to use. So as soon as I click that, it says select objects. Well, I want to repeat this one chair into a theater type arrangement. So I'm going to click that chair. As soon as I hit enter, it actually creates a rectangular array kind of for me to play with. Now, it does have grips, okay? So I could actually pull on these grips to create basically the pattern I want. But let's say I'm very specific and I want to tell it exactly what I want. I want there to actually be 3 columns, not 4. Notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. But I want 4 rows, kind of the opposite of what it's got. So up here at the top, it gives the parameters that you can play with. So where it says 4 columns, I'm going to change that to 3 columns, okay? And you actually kind of have to go back into your screen before it'll show it. So don't freak out if it doesn't show immediately. And then for the rows, I actually want it to be 4 rows. And that one actually did it faster. And I need these spacing to be a little different. It kind of just creates a spacing all on its own. So if you go up here, notice between the columns is 2'3", and between the rows it is 2'3". It's kind of making it very balanced. But let's say between the columns, so that they have room for their feet and jump up and down and get excited. Let's say between the actual columns, I need it to be a little bit wider. Let's put in 3 feet and enter. Now I have more spacing for them to actually sit. Now if I like the 2'3", I can keep that, or I could change that. Or I could say, you know what, I want the total distance between the rows, not between the, well, it's, okay, let me get back to some basics. When I say I want 3 feet between the columns, it's actually 3 feet from here to here. So they're saying the distance from basically the same point on the column. So if I measured from here to here, that would be 3 feet. And from here to here would be 3 feet. So it's not the total distance from here all the way to the end. You kind of have to think of it as this kind of a starting point right here to this kind of an ending point. Okay, so if I say up here that my total for my rows is actually 7 feet, it will actually widen it just slightly. It just changed it to 2'4" between instead of 2'3". And I don't mean between here and here between, but between one point to the same point on the next row. Okay, so you kind of have to remember that when you want to put in distances. And then one thing you need to realize is the word associative. It right now is on associative. So if I kind of hover off, notice how it's blue. That means that every single one of these is going to equal one object. So if I keep it associative and hit enter, all of these will be one object. It won't be basically 12 chairs. It'll be one unit of 12. Okay, so it kind of depends on how you want to use your array. If you wanted to play a bunch with these chairs, don't make it associative. But if you don't want to mess with it, keep it associative. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to keep it associative. But notice when I click, it's one object. But notice also when you click, you can adjust it, which is super cool. So I can say, you know what, I have 3 more people coming and they want to sit over here on the end. Then I can say I want my rows to change from 4 to 5. Now it does kind of clash with the bed, so maybe I want to make the spacing between them to be 2'2" this time. So notice it moved them a little bit further away. I basically have the same thing, but I just was able to edit it. And then there's also a couple features over here like replace an item. So before I actually show you that, I'm going to hit escape. Okay, so I still have my edited version of that, but I'm going to create over here an actual item that I can replace some of these with. I'm going to create a rectangle that is 1'9", 1'9". Okay, it's a little bit bigger than this. Let's say that these are different chairs that you may have. Maybe they have cool cushions or something, but you don't have a lot of them. You have mostly these chairs, but you need to replace some of these with these chairs. I'm going to click this array and I'm going to say replace item. When I click that, then it says, what do you want? Select the replacement one that you actually want to use. I'm going to select this rectangle, which is why I kind of had to get out of the command, create the rectangle, and then come back. So I'm going to select this rectangle. I'm going to hit enter. And then it's basically asking what's the point of reference for that rectangle. They think you want it to be here, but I actually want it to be in the middle of this rectangle. So I'm going to do my little tracking and I'm going to select the middle. Okay. And now it's asking for which ones do I want to replace in this group. Notice select an item, but you don't have to select just one. So let's say this is going to be a square and this is going to be a square, and maybe I'm going to put 3 in the back to be squares. Okay, so I now have 5 that are squares and the rest of the other chairs. You can basically select whichever ones you want, and when you hit enter and then exit, because notice you can do some other options here, it gets you back to this array editing, and so you say close, and now it has changed your array to be 2 different items in there. You could have 3 if you created another object and said replace some others. So you can still change this up even though it sees it as one object. Okay, so there's some options for editing that. But let's say the party's over, okay, and you want to put maybe a little card table in the middle of the room, and some people want to play cards. Okay, let's move these wonderful chairs out of the way, and let's create basically a table with some chairs around it. Okay, I'm going to go to circle, and I'm going to say, okay, the middle of my table, let's put it somewhat in the corner. Okay, so over here, and it actually has a 4-foot diameter. So I could say 2 feet for the radius and hit enter, or I could say D and enter and put 4 feet. Okay, so there's my 4-foot diameter table. Now I'm going to actually, well, if I wanted one of these chairs, I would have to explode this array. So that's kind of like, do I want to explode it and make it all single items? Or maybe I could just use this chair that I already have. Okay, so let's move this chair basically over to this table. Okay, I'm going to have it exactly centered on this quadrant. Notice it says quadrant. That was one of my options that I have over here on my OSNAP. But I'm going to pull it quadrant, and I'm going to pull it up like 4 inches away. Okay, so I have one chair. That's not going to be very helpful for, a card game, unless you want to play solitaire. So you can go to array, and instead of using rectangular, you can use polar. So if I go to polar array, it's similar and yet different. So it says select objects. I'm going to select my chair as my object that I want to polar array and hit enter. And now it's asking for the center point. What is the center point of basically a circle of items that you want to create? Well, it would have to be the center of the table, right? And immediately when I select the center of the table, it puts basically 6 chairs, as you see where it says items, It puts 6 chairs equally spaced around the table. Now, if I only have 5 for the game, I can change that number to be 5 and enter. And yes, I do have to kind of go back to my space to see those. But what it's doing is it's equally distancing the angle between each of those around. And it does say filling of 360. If I didn't need to have them go all the way around, then I would change that to be, I don't know, if they're only going halfway around the table, I could say 180 and enter. And notice now it's still trying to fit in 5 chairs, but in 180 degrees instead of 360. So let's say you only wanted 4 on that side. You could hit 4 and enter, kind of go back into your space. And then maybe you have something else going on this side. Maybe they want to play cards, but they still want to see the TV. Okay, so you can put the option of if you want to fill it all the way around or just part way. I mean, this angle can be whatever you place in it. For the rows, this is kind of funny because if I change it from 1 to 2 and go back into my space, it's going to radiate from that center point basically my chairs. That wouldn't be great for what I'm trying to accomplish, but just to show you that you can have chairs go radiating from that center point out, and you can change the distance or the total distance from like the front to the front to be a certain distance. Okay, levels actually are for 3D, so you don't want to change those right now. That would kind of mess with you. Also notice rotate items. That is on right now. So it is rotating as it goes around the way those chairs are facing. Let's change this first of all, the rows back to 1 so it doesn't, look funny. But let's say that I uncheck that. Now they're all going to be facing the same way as the one that was starting it. If I started at this one, which I did, they're all going to face that direction. But notice also where it says direction. If I click that, it's just going to change the direction on where I'm going to rotate around. So the default is to go counterclockwise. So if this is on, it goes counter. But if you want it to actually flip to the other side, then you would have to change the direction to go clockwise around. So just another thing to keep in mind when you're rotating around. I do want it to actually be on the other side, the side it was, and I do want them to rotate as they go around. So I'm going to make sure those are checked properly. Same thing with the rectangular. You can say it's associative or not. So if I want these 4 chairs to be connected together, I would want to keep it associative. But for this case, let's turn this off, okay, and hit enter. Now if you notice, I can select each of these individually. I can say, you know what, this one actually wants to be rotated, so I could do rotate and select it, and select somewhere in the middle, and say I want this chair to actually be facing this wall, and it wouldn't want to touch the table, so I'd want to move it a little bit out. But then without making them associative, you can go back and change different parameters than you could with keeping them associative. So that's another option. Another array that I want to show you is the last one, and that is the one that is called a path array. So before I do that, let's copy one of these flags that we have down here. I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to copy from basically its endpoint to this endpoint. Okay, I want to copy these flags into an array that follows this path. So I would go to my array, but I would select path. As soon as I click that, it says select objects. Well, I want to select the flag to be arrayed or copied on a path. So I'm going to click that and hit enter, and then notice it says select path curve. So what's the path that I want it to follow? Well, this path is. And remember, this is all one line now. It's one polyline. So once I select that, it will put flags in a pattern following that line. Now it looks kind of funky, right? That is where these parameters come into play. Let's say I do want 7, so I don't want to change that. But let's say I want them to actually, follow a certain pattern, okay? I'm going to unalign them. It is on a line, but I'm going to unalign them to show, okay, if I unalign them, they're all going to be pointing the same direction as the first one. That might be how you want it, or maybe you want it to actually follow that curve, right? It wasn't really doing that real well. That is where the tangent direction would come in handy. When I click that, it's asking for the first point of my tangent. I'm going to select basically the end point of that line, but now I'm going to go straight up as the tangent direction. And yeah, now they're looking a little different. They're still pointing all the same direction, but notice the first one. The first one is lined up with that curve properly. It's not sticking out at that other angle that it had. It's now tangent with that curve. So if I go and say align items now, notice they're all tangent with that curve. So they're following the curve tangent to it. So that's something to keep in mind if you have an object like that. Let's say that some of them need to be like this and some of them are just plain circles, like maybe heights. Okay. First of all, let's increase the number. Instead of having 7, which it's not allowing me to change right now, so I'm just going to hit enter. Oh, that's right. These are not associative. I didn't do associative like I did with the rectangle one. Okay, so let's actually undo that, and I'm going to redo my array just like I did before, except I'm going to actually make sure that it's associative. So I'm going to select that first. I'm going to do my tangent direction. I know I'm going kind of fast. I'm just repeating what I did before, but I'm making sure that they're actually aligned to it associatively. Okay, I'm going to select this again, but I'm going to change the items to be 8 instead of 7. Ooh, it does not want to do 8. Did you see that? Maybe it doesn't like the spacing. Let's try the spacing to be 2'6". Yeah. So what it's saying is I can't fit 8 along this curve unless I change the spacing. And now it actually can fit 9. So we'll go with 9. Okay. I'll click that again, but I want to change or replace my items just like I did over here. Oops, I forgot to create my item first. So let's go to draw and let's go to donut. And I'm going to say that my inside diameter for my donut is just 2 inches. But the outside diameter is actually 12 inches. Okay. And then I'm just going to select a spot out here for my donut. I want every other one of these flags to actually be this donut. Okay. So I'm going to select this array and I'm going to say replace item. And I'm going to say this is the one that I want to replace it with. So I'm going to select that and hit enter. And then it's asking me for the base point. I do want it to be from the center of that. And now it's asking me for the item that I want to replace. If it was every other one, I would select this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. But notice I could actually select all of them if I wanted them. If I wanted all of them to be circles, I could change all of them. Okay, they're now all replaced. I've actually changed my entire array. And then I would hit exit and close to actually get out of my array command. But now I have circles or donuts actually on that path. Hint, hint, that's kind of similar to your array assignment that you're going to be working on later. Okay, so for the last thing that I want to show you is editing using your grips. All along, we've been editing using the modify commands, which is actually the proper way to do it. But if you, well, like for me, example, I go back and forth between selecting the command or selecting the object first. You're like, what? Why do I select the object first? Well, let me show you an example. This line up here. Let's say I needed to, I don't know, make it longer. Maybe I need this wall line to stretch out longer this way. I don't know why, but I'm just going to use that as an example. I could go to stretch and I could select this, or I could go to lengthen and select this, or I could select the line. Notice once I select the line, I have 3 blue grips, and the number of grips and the position of them depend on the object. So I'm going to escape that, but if I went to the circle, I actually have 1 at each quadrant and 1 in the center. So the number of grips does depend on the actual object. So let's go back to the line. If I select the line, I have the 3 grips. Right now they're what you would call cold. They're blue, so they're cold. They can't do anything. Once I hover on one, it turns kind of warm. It gets orange. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to select me? Do you want to not select me? Notice if I go to the endpoint one, it actually gives me a couple options that I immediately could do. For the midpoint one, it's kind of waiting. There are options, but they're not shown. Once I select one, notice what it does. It turns red, and it's actually ready to do something with it. So if I wanted to lengthen or stretch it, in this, using the grip option, it's basically the same thing. So I could actually stretch this out, as far as I wanted it to go, or stretch it back this direction. I can lengthen it or make it shorter. It's basically ready. Or I could actually say, you know what, I want it to actually, come this direction instead of going this direction. If I wanted to go to a 45, once I click, it actually rotated it around just by selecting the endpoint. I'm going to undo that. But if I select it and select the endpoint and just pull it out and say I need it to be 10 feet longer, I put 10 feet and enter, that line now all of a sudden is 10 feet longer than it was. Okay? Um, let's actually undo that. But if I select the midpoint, so if I make that red, then when I right click, I can pick all sorts of options. I can say rotate like I just did before. I can say move, and actually that is the default. If I don't even right click, let me show you that one. If I just select it, that is the default. It's ready for me to move it to whatever position I want it to go to. So I could just select where I want to move that line. But if I right click, I also have other options. I have erase it, I can move it just like I showed you. I can copy it, so I could actually select the copy, and then it still wants to know the base point. So I could say I want to copy this line maybe over to the midpoint of this line. Don't know why I would for this example, but notice you can use your grips to basically copy something. And if I select it and select the endpoint and do right click, I still have some of those options. I can scale it, so I can make it bigger or smaller. So I could say scale, and let's say I want to scale from this endpoint and say I only want it to be half as long. I would put 0.5, and now that line is only half as long. So it's just kind of a different way that you can edit, not all the editing that's up here, but some of these features. Obviously you can't fill it, okay, and you can't array and you can't trim, but all these others actually you can use just by selecting the grip and either making it red and like moving it, or by actually right clicking and selecting one of those options that are within the right click command. What's also cool, oh, well, how about we just stretch this back over to that endpoint? Notice how easy that was without actually using the like extend or fillet command. But let's say that I had a polyline. So I'll draw a polyline, and it's, let's say, 10 feet high. So I'm going to hit 10 feet and enter. Okay, it's just a single polyline. But if I click a polyline to edit, now notice this was a line, this is a polyline, and I hover on the midpoint, I have some different options that I didn't have with the other one. I have add vertex. If I click that, it basically creates a vertex or another point that I can adjust. So I can say, you know what, this is actually a funky column, so I'm going to pull it out, let's say 2 feet, okay, and then I'm going to hit escape, and I can say mirror, and I can say I want to mirror this image over itself. So basically selecting the middle of this, and I have basically, a diamond. It is 2 different lines, but I did create a vertex to do that. I also could click this and say remove vertex, and then it gets it back to where it was as a straight line. But let's look at the other option, convert to arc. So if I do that, okay, this line was 10 feet long, I could pull it out. Now it is an arc, but I could pull it out to be 2 feet wide, like this. And then I could actually stretch this arc, maybe, what was it before we had? To like 12? So I don't know if you remember, but we actually created an arc right over here that was 9 feet long and 2 feet wide. So if I go to move and select this one and put it right at the end, ooh, I must have adjusted it a little bit differently. But notice how you could actually create these arcs by just using a line. Let's see if we can do that maybe like the more proper way. So let's erase this. Let's actually create a line. I'm going to line it up with this. That's exactly 9 feet high. Okay. And then I'm going to select it. And with the grip, I'm going to wait for it to come. Oh, I did line. Did you see that? I'm so used to line. Polyline. Okay, let's get this right. But let's make it 9 feet long. Okay. I'm going to click it and hover in the middle and say, whoops, convert to arc. So now it's an arc, and I'm going to pull it out exactly 2 feet. Now, if I actually move it, whoa, we don't want to stretch it. We want to move this from this endpoint to this endpoint. Notice how it's exactly like the other arc. So those are 2 different ways you could actually make an arc. You can either actually go to arc, or you could just edit a polyline into it. So that's kind of up to you on how you want to do that for your assignment that you will have. So that's all I wanted to show you for today. But if you have any questions, either rewatch this or text me, or maybe do a little looking into the book in the index for some of these commands, and have some fun with this. We're in awesome AutoCAD.